In the hills beyond known civilization, among lands few dare tread, stands an ancient estate, a relic of forgotten grandeur and wealth, its walls encrusted with the slow decay of centuries. Within its confines, terror festered, and evil brewed, drawn forth by one man's reckless ambition to know what lies beyond the veil of mortal understanding. He was a gentleman of means, bearing a name that, at one time, commanded respect. But he was also a man discontented with the ordinary world, disdainful of the limits of humanity. For years he studied tomes of forbidden lore and texts whose writers had long since vanished into whispers. This ancestor of mine found within those yellowed pages dark and tantalizing promises that echoed in his mind. They spoke of hidden things, of powers slumbering just beyond mortal sight, and with each page, he felt a longing awaken, a pull that urged him towards something below the surface of reality itself. It was not long before he began excavations, prying open the very earth beneath the estate in search of the mysteries that had so ensnared his mind. The first foray unearthed a network of tunnels, labyrinthine and dank, carved by ancient, nameless hands. The walls were slick with age and rot, their surfaces adorned with markings older than civilization, symbols that twisted and warred before the eye, as if alive and resentful of being seen. Still he pressed onward, ignoring the warnings of those who had lived in the village for generations. The elders knew well that the lands around the estate were cursed. They told tales of disappearances, of strange sounds echoing through the trees at night, and of fields where crops grew twisted and malformed. Yet my master dismissed these as superstitions, the fearful mutterings of ignorant minds. To him there was only one truth, that power lay in the darkness, and he would have it. With each layer of earth peeled back, the air grew colder, thick with a palpable malevolence that seemed to press against the walls. Strange things began to appear in the estate above, rustling movements, phantom noises, objects shifting of their own accord. And in his journals, written with an unsteady hand, the ancestor recorded his visions, shapes that moved in the dark, a voice calling his name, urging him onward. He felt them watching, observing him with eyes that bore no resemblance to anything human. One night, his madness broke free entirely as he descended into the dungeon alone. For days there was no sign of him, and when he returned, he was forever changed. His body was a shadow of his former self, his skin pallid, and his eyes hollow, as though some part of him had been left below, irretrievably lost. He said nothing of what he had seen, but he spoke often of a revelation, of a power lying just beyond his grasp that he would unleash upon the world. Yet his journals from this period tell a different tale, a tale of terrible things glimpsed in the dark. He wrote of vast, formless shapes writhing in chambers deeper than light had ever touched, their outlines visible only by the feeble glimmer of his lantern. He described walls lined with bones arranged in grotesque patterns, bones whose shapes were foreign to any earthly creature. And as he pushed deeper, he began to hear a laughter that echoed from nowhere, yet filled the entire space, shaking his very spirit. In time, the corruption that he had invited began to infect the very land around the estate. The Hamlet, a modest village near the estate, grew poisoned, crops withered in the fields, blighted and unusable, Livestock became sickly, their flesh pocked with unnatural growths. Children, innocent of all evil, became fevered and fell into dark dreams from which they awoke screaming. Madness spread like a creeping plague, claiming the minds of even the hardiest souls. And all the while, the Ancestor's influence grew, his eyes darkening with the fervor of one who had looked into the abyss and been welcomed by it. It was then that he called for assistance, sending missives out across the land. He offered rewards to those who would enter the dungeon, promising gold, fame, and redemption. And so they came. Knights, scholars, warriors, and scoundrels alike. They arrived armed with steel and belief, each convinced that they would be the one to end the curse and return triumphant. Little did they know the hell that awaited them in the chambers below. I watched as they descended, each face marked with the bravery or the foolishness that only the ignorant possess. The first among them were men of faith and conviction, bearing talismans and symbols meant to ward off evil. But the dungeon twisted these relics into mere decorations, no blessing capable of holding back what festered within. The first rooms they entered were strange, yet recognizable, decayed remnants of an ancient civilization. But as they ventured deeper, they found hallways that defied reason, passages shifting and expanding in impossible directions, filled with the distant hum of a chanting that was more felt than heard. Few returned from these excursions. Those who did were marked by horrors unseen, their faces gaunt, their hands shaking. Some spoke of voices that whispered promises of power and safety, offering them glimpses of forbidden knowledge. Others could no longer sleep, haunted by nightmares of things that moved in the dark, the scrape of claws against stone, and laughter, always the laughter, echoing from somewhere they could not reach, as if mocking their every attempt at survival. And then there were those who succumbed fully, their minds shattered by the creeping dread. I remember one, a crusader, once strong and unyielding, who fled screaming back to the Hamlet, speaking only in fragmented whispers of eyes in the walls, and a gate to the stars opening beneath the estate. He would claw at the air, cursing unseen figures, and shouting that they had no right to look upon him. Meanwhile, the Hamlet too began to warp. The village square, once bustling, grew silent. Families boarded their homes, seeking safety from a horror which they could not name. But no door, no matter how thick, could keep out the influence that seeped up from below. Even the strongest minds cracked in the face of it. Paranoia took hold, and neighbors turned against each other. Children vanished in the dead of night, their mothers driven mad with grief, claiming to hear the faint sound of chanting echoing from below the earth. Some in the hamlet turned to worship the very powers that had plagued them, forming cults that practiced vile rites in the name of the darkness. They believed with fanatical fervor that if they could only appease these forces, they might be spared their unfortunate fate. But alas, the dungeon is a thing of hunger, not of mercy, and their sacrifices only fed the growing void. I watched as they scrawled arcane symbols on the walls of their homes, burned offerings, and mutilated themselves, desperate for a protection that would never come. Deeper still, below the swine and the dead, lie the chamber of the eldritch court, a terrible sanctum where beings of ancient malice convene, grotesque and incomprehensible, beyond description. They are things from another realm, their forms twisted and fluid, resembling nothing of this earth. They call out to each adventurer by name, their voices caressing the minds of those who wander too close. Many were lost here, lured into the court by the seductive promise of enlightenment. Their bodies were never found, for they were claimed by the abyss, devoured whole, leaving behind only whispers and fragments of their shattered souls. And so, the tales of the dungeon spread like poison across the land, as one by one, adventurers fell to madness or death. The dungeon itself seemed alive, a festering wound upon the world that pulsed and spread, feeding off the suffering of those within. Each death, each broken mind added to its strength, as if the darkness had a will of its own, a hunger that could never be sated. In the end, I am but a witness, a prisoner of this place as well, cursed to watch as the estate, the Hamlet, and all of those who enter the dungeons are consumed by its endless appetite for despair and suffering. I have seen horrors that words cannot capture, felt the cold breath of entities that belong to a realm far beyond of our own. The chambers below is not a place, it is an idea, a living, breathing entity, born of malevolence and madness, one that now feeds upon the land and those who dare to challenge it. And so I wait, knowing well that war will come, that the promises of glory will lure them here, into the eternal night, down into the darkest dungeon, where the only certainty is madness or death. Hey there, Hazmat here. That was my first time covering Darkest Dungeon, but it may certainly not be the last. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to let me know in the comments below so I can create more videos. As always, a big thanks goes out to the Hunts Lounge, specifically the exclusive Gitchy Boy, the exclusive Johnny Sevens, the exclusive Warmonk, and the exclusive Rat. The VIPs, Corvo Bearslayer, Derivative, Doc Powell, Gino Lucero, Goose, Hambone, Jiminal Bob, Corey Peterson, Michael Thornhill, More Death Menace, Ryan, Slip, Stas Biestek, Sunrise Phoenix, TJ Crane, Texas Toast, and the Wizard of Copper. And of course, all the regulars. A big thanks goes out to Cyberbeep as well for helping me establish the initial style of the video. Appreciate it, man. If you want to support me in the channel, consider signing up as a member, either here on YouTube or on Patreon, for as little as $1 a month. Link is in the description below. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.